One thing I've noticed is for a lot of modern people who grew up kind of with a materialist assumption or focus of life, going through school, you don't hear much about past lives, future lives, heaven, karma. You hear a lot of other stuff which is related to maybe getting a career, maybe owning a house, maybe a car, a nice holidays, a retirement plan. You hear a lot of stuff aimed at directing people to become good citizens, good consumers, good workers. You don't hear very much about cultivating your ultimate nature or going to heaven and beyond. And so modern people do have a kind of a materialist / hedonist slant to the way they perceive the world. What do I mean by hedonist? I mean that people try to squeeze as much pleasure out of life associated with the five senses. And then when we come to meditate, modern people, I think sometimes we can misapply the Buddha's recommendation to not take on things that we can't verify for ourselves. I think it's almost like I describe it as having a superstitious belief in doubt. There's a way that people grasp their doubt. When you believe a doubt, you're grasping a doubt. That means you're believing the doubt. Other traditions talk about the benefit of having a beginner's mind. And what do we mean by a beginner's mind? It means acknowledging that we don't know. There's many things we don't know. That has a beautiful humility to it. That has a beginning of receptivity to it. If we come to our practice and we want to watch the breath and we want to have samadhi, want concentrated mind states, we hope to have a glimpse into ultimate reality. But if we have this kind of assumption that I'm only going to believe it if I see it with my physical eyes, I'm only going to believe it if I can verify it with my logic, there's a kind of a closedness to that. There's a kind of a lack of receptivity to that. And so I think it's good to acknowledge that even in the spectrum of light of what human eye can see, even among creatures around us, other creatures see much more because they have eyes that work better. Dogs have much more refined hearing. Cats have much more amazing smell. And so it's good to just acknowledge that our senses are limited. And then there's a whole spectrum of what you would call reality that our ordinary senses don't perceive. The reason it's good to start with that is there's a humility in that, and then to be open to the possibility of perceiving things which are more subtle. How would you do that? That's going to be more of a mental experience. And I'm suggesting that I think it's quite important, because if you want to have an insight into a more subtle reality, grasping at what you know, that's going to have an effect on how open you are to perceiving something more subtle. So we have to acknowledge the way we grasp and the way we hold our doubts.